liberals, both have a chance to come forward and give it our best shot.
Coming up next, General Norman Schwarzkopf briefs reporters in Saudi Arabia on the status of the Persian Gulf War, including reports of the first American ground forces to die in battle. The briefing began Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, which is 9 o'clock in the evening in Saudi Arabia.
Today, ladies and gentlemen, we have a special presentation by the Commander-in-Chief of United States Central Command and the Commander of Operation Desert Storm, General H. Norman Schwarzkopf. We'll have a question and answer session following the briefing. Ladies and gentlemen, General Schwarzkopf.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming. At 3 o'clock tomorrow morning, Operation Desert Storm will complete its second week. Last week, at the end of the completion of its first week, Secretary Cheney and General Powell gave you their assessment of where we stood at that time. They have asked me to give you a similar assessment at the end of the second week. Let me start by covering the campaign objectives to date. First chart, please. I realize that some of these may be difficult to read, so I'll go over them very quickly. But in our first phase, what we wanted to do was disrupt leadership command and control, destroy centralized air defense command and control, attack combat aircraft in the air and on the ground to achieve air superiority, damage nuclear, biological, and chemical storage and production capability, and commence attack on the Republican Guards. Once we had that done, we planned to go into a second phase, which was to destroy the air defense radars and missiles in the Kuwaiti theater of operation to achieve undisputed control of the air. Some people call that air supremacy. And finally, to sever supply lines in the Kuwaiti theater of operation. And once that phase was completed, we planned then to isolate the Kuwaiti theater of operations, continue our attacks on the Republican Guards, and we had other objectives which I will not discuss further. In order to tell you, to measure our success to date, I think I will measure it against the objectives that I've just discussed. Let's first of all start with the leadership objective. You know, early in the early days of the campaign, we did attack many leadership targets. 26 leadership targets were struck. 60% of all those were severely damaged or destroyed. We also attacked power plants and telecommunications facilities. 1/4 of Iraq's electrical generating facilities are completely inoperative, and another 50% suffered degraded operations. I think I should point out right here that we never had any intention of destroying 100% of all the Iraqi electrical power because of our interest in making sure that civilians did not suffer unduly. We felt that we had to leave some of the electrical power in effect, and we've done that. 75% of Iraq's command, control, and communication facilities have been struck during our air campaign, and 1/3 of those are completely destroyed or inoperative. As a result, Saddam Hussein and the Iraqis have been forced to switch to backup systems, and those systems are far less effective and more easily targeted. Let me talk briefly about air defense. First of all, the F-117 remains virtually invisible and is highly effective. But further, we've attacked air defense nerve systems, striking 29 targets and more than 800 sorties. As a result, the Iraqis have abandoned centralized control of their air defense within Iraq and Kuwait. Very important point. This accounts in part for the very, very low attrition rate of coalition aircraft. Pilot skill also accounts to that low attrition rate. As you know, we've flown more than 30,000 sorties, and we've lost only 19 aircraft. In the last 5 days, we've lost only 1 aircraft to hostile ground fire. Talking a little bit more about air-to-air combat. As you know, General Powell declared that we had air supremacy last week. We've destroyed 29 Iraqi fighter aircraft with not one single air-to-air loss on the part of the coalition. Also, I think it's important to remember that not a single Iraqi aircraft to date has penetrated the coalition airspace since this war began. In the last 3 days alone, F-15s have shot down 9 MiG-23s and Mirage F-1s. The Iraqi early warning system has completely failed, and their aircraft have been caught totally by surprise when we attacked them. A subject that's been very much in the news this week is airfields, so I'd like to talk now a little bit about airfields. Next chart, please. Well, we originally targeted 44 airfields, 16 primary airfields, and another 28 dispersal airfields. We constantly are reevaluating this based upon where they put their airplanes. To date, based upon where their airplanes have been, we've attacked 38 airfields, and we've flown over 1,300 sorties against these airfields. The 38 airfields have all been struck at least once, and many of them have been struck at least 4 times. At least 9 of them are non-operational. But it's a very important point. We never had any intention to render all of the airfields inoperable. That was not our intention at all. Our intention is to render the Air Force ineffective. There have been varying reports about how many of these airfields have been destroyed, and there have been varying reports about how much damage we've done on the ground. I tell you, we can confirm at least 25 airplanes destroyed on the ground, and I want to give you an example. Please, next chart. This is a graphic reproduction of some hard evidence that we have of the Al-Taganim airfield on 23 January. We went in to the Al-Taganim and we destroyed 3 Badger aircraft on the ground. In addition to destroying 3 Badger aircraft, we did severe damage to an Adnan Candid airplane. This is the equivalent of our US AWACS. When we looked at our results, we found out that there were 3 more Badgers on the ground, so we flew back the next day and we destroyed those 3. Now, as a result of this type of operation, they decided to put all of their aircraft in hardened structures. They tried to hide their aircraft. Therefore, we commenced a systematic destruction of those hardened shelters. At this time, I would like to introduce Brigadier General Glosson. He happens to be the commander of the 14th Air Division. He reminded me today, even though I look upon him as my and General Horner's principal Air Force target planner, and he's going to discuss a little bit of this hardened shelter attack. Would you start the video tape, please?
What you're about to see are the hardened aircraft shelters at 3 installations. The first installation being one of his primary MiG-21 bases of the Iraqi Air Force. That shelter was destroyed by a F-117, as are many of the other in this tape. Again, the F-117. Each and every hardened aircraft shelter obviously does not have an airplane in it, as you can see by the explosion and the degree of explosion. However, there are a significant number of them that do and have other things stored in them, that being a case in point. Again, the 117. Talil Airfield is one of Iraqi's major F-1 or Mirage 2000 bases. This hardened aircraft shelter was destroyed by an F-111.
Okay, would you stop the tape, please? The results to date of this type of attack, if we have destroyed more than 70 of these hardened shelters, and quite frankly, the Iraqi aircraft are running out of places to hide. We now have reports that many of their smaller aircraft, they have moved to roads and hidden them in residential areas that are close to the airfields because they know we're not attacking civilian targets. As you all well know, 89 of their aircraft, and I should say these are their frontline F-1s, Mirages, and their MiG-23 fencers, 89 of them have flown into Iran. The simple fact of the matter is that now Every time an Iraqi airplane takes off the ground, it's running away. As a result, Chuck Horner, my CENTAF commander, has now claimed air supremacy. I'd like to talk a little bit about the isolation of the Kuwaiti theater of operations. One of the ways we do this is by destroying the bridges that lead into the Kuwaiti theater of operations area. Next chart, please. We've targeted a total of 36 bridges. Out of those 36 bridges, we have attacked 33 of them with over 790 sorties. Obviously, by shutting off the bridges, we shut off the supply lines that supply the forces in southern Iraq and in the Kuwaiti theater of operation. I'd like to now show you a little film of the destruction of the bridges numbered 1, 2, 3, and 4 in order, and give you an idea of what we're talking about. Would you show the video, please? The first video is the railroad bridge. And obviously they have very limited rail lines, and when you take a railroad bridge out, it makes a big difference. We try and hit right near the shore, I've been told, because that's the most difficult to repair and does the most damage if you get in at that point. That's one end of the bridge. You'll now see the same bridge again. Notice that's where we hit before. The span's gone. We're now hitting the other end of that railroad bridge. Okay, next we're going to show you some versions of highway bridges. You might ask on this next shot why it is we're hitting the bridge in the middle. The answer is you can see how cloudy it is. The pilot just breaks out of the cloud and doesn't have a lot of time to get his sight on the bridge, so he just puts the sight where he can on the bridge and bombs away. Another type of highway bridge with a different type of abutment structure. Bridge, of course, running this way now. I'm now going to show you a picture of the luckiest man in Iraq on this particular day. Keep your eye on the crosshairs. Right there. Look at here. Right through the crosshairs. And now in his rear view mirror, okay, stop the tape, please. I'd like to point out a couple of things that are significant about the tapes you've just shown. All those tapes were taken at night. The night is the time when before he moved the most and resupplies the most. You'll notice that on all 4 of those bridges, you only saw 1 vehicle. That's another indication of how we're interdicting his supplies. 2 days ago, we observed a supply convoy backed up for 15 miles on the road from Baghdad to Basra. It was backed up on the north side of the road right near the bridge that we had knocked out. Obviously, we attacked that convoy, and we observed countless secondary explosions when we attacked it. J-stars and other very sophisticated systems give us a level of measure of just how much damage we're doing to his logistics traffic. This is, over here on this map, excuse me, Roger. This is the main supply route right here that comes down into Kuwait City. In the past, on any given day, in the early part of the campaign, you could look at that main supply route. At any given time, you'd find about 1,000 trucks on that MSR. Nowadays, whenever we look at it with any of our sophisticated systems, the maximum we find is less than 100. That means about a 90-day degradation, a 90% degradation in his supply rate. If you translate that over to what we know about his supply rate, it takes him about 20,000 tons per day to support the troops in Kuwait. We feel that we've reduced him to about 2,000 tons per day. We've got some anecdotal information that would also demonstrate that we're being very effective. We get many, many reports out of Kuwait that Iraqi soldiers are begging for food from Kuwaiti civilians, in many cases stealing it also. The enemy prisoners of war that we've taken have told us that they're receiving only 1 meal a day. That meal generally consists of a bowl of rice or a bowl of beans, and they have no water in which to bathe. And as a result, many of the enemy prisoners of war that we've taken are infested with body lice, and many of them have open sores on their body. I'd like next to come to nuclear, biological, and chemical. Next chart, please. We had 31 targeted locations, and we have attacked all 31 with over 535 sorties, as you can see. We know this is of great interest to the international community, and therefore we were happy to report that we have destroyed all of their nuclear reactor facilities. Baghdad Nuclear Research Center has been leveled to rubble. Precision-guided missiles and TLAM cruise missiles have struck hard at the nuclear, biological, and chemical facilities. As have the many aircraft we've shown. Over half of them, those facilities have been severely damaged or totally destroyed. We have absolute confirmation that we've destroyed over 11 chemical and biological storage areas, and we've also destroyed or heavily damaged 3 chemical and biological production facilities, and we're going to continue a relentless attack on this very, very, very heinous weapons system. Let me turn now to the Republican Guards. We're targeting the Republican Guards with about 300 sorties a day, 300 sorties a day. We're using very accurate bombing, and even in bad weather, the many secondary explosions are confirming the fact that we're inflicting continuous damage on them. Now remember, I said 300 sorties a day, but let me give you some examples. On 26 January, 27 B-52s dropped 455 tons of explosive on the Republican Guards. Yesterday, 21 B-52s dropped 315 tons of bombs on them. And today, 28 B-52s dropped 470 tons on them. That's not to mention the other strikes that we're doing with F-16s, F-15Es, A-6s, etc. Just from 12 noon yesterday until 3 o'clock this morning, that's a little bit more than a half a day, we have confirmation of 178 trucks destroyed, 55 artillery pieces destroyed or damaged, 52 tanks destroyed or damaged, and heavy secondary explosions from revetments and fires all over the area. We had one spectacular explosion on the 28th of January. Let me give you a reference. If on a scale of 1 to 10, the eruption of a volcano registered 10, and the recent explosion at the Soviet rocket propellant plant would register a 9, the explosion, the secondary explosion we had the other day, registered at 12. We now have confirmation that we destroyed over 125 storage revetments in the largest ammo storage area in the northern part of the Kuwaiti theater of operations. We're talking about right up here in this area right here. And needless to say, we are going to go back and visit it again to get anything else that happens to be left there. We're also attacking very close in to our positions with over 300 sorties a day. Just to give you some results this week, on the 28th of January, Marine F&A 18s and Air Force A-10s engaged 3 convoys in South Kuwait with multiple secondaries noted. Frog sites were also struck with large secondary explosions noted. Convoy of heavy equipment transports carrying 20 armored personnel carriers and 8 tanks was attacked, with 12 of the personnel carriers and all the tanks observed burning. 5 to 6 self-propelled artillery tubes were destroyed in the same area. And on 29 January, the Marines sighted 80 to 100 vehicles in revetted positions, and they destroyed at least 34 armored personnel carriers. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention naval operations. The Navy's done a great job supporting the air campaign, and the Navy has flown over 3,500 sorties from our 6 carriers, and they've also launched more than 260 Tomahawk missiles. Chart 7, please. We have 170 ships out there that have established sea controls on the waters of the Arabian Gulf and the Red Sea. We have already sunk or disabled 46 Iraqi naval vehicles, and the Navy has captured 74 enemy prisoners of war in 2 engagements. I also think it's significant to note the very limited area of operations of the Iraqi naval forces. As a result of our naval operations, they really never venture much out beyond the straits here by Boubian Island up into Qasr. Occasionally they get out into Kuwaiti waters, but when they do, we certainly go after them. I would tell you even today, British Lynx helicopters, Saudi Dolphins, and U.S. Army helicopters attacked 6 patrol boats. The results was 4 sunk. This morning, we were also attacking some patrol craft, and at last report, we had damaged 3 or 4. I would be remiss if I didn't mention the readiness of our amphibious forces. We have very large amphibious forces over here, and they are continually training and ready to do the job when called upon to do so. And of course, the maritime interception operations are still continuing with more than 7,000 intercepts to date. When you talk about Navy, you think about water, and around here lately, when you think about water, you've thought about oil. So I'm going to talk a little bit about oil for a minute. Next. You remember the pictures I showed you the last time I was here. This was the original oil spill before we took any military action against the manifolds. I told you we weren't sure what we had done, but the next day, this was the result where we'd already diminished. I am very proud to tell you that yesterday, this is the result of that area. Blue water, no more oil slick out there, and the United States military is very proud of any role we may have played in doing away with this ecological act of terrorism. Let me now turn to ground operations. U.S. and coalition forces are defending Saudi Arabia, and we're also repositioning. Until last night, there were no major ground engagements, although the Marines in their assigned sector were routinely receiving sporadic rocket and artillery fire. And in their effort to reduce that, on at least 3 occasions last week, the United States Marine Corps conducted artillery raids on enemy frontline units. Night before last, they were particularly effective and reported severe damage on the enemy and great loss of life. I'd like now to sort of report what's been going on last night and today. If you look at this position here, yesterday evening, we had an attack in that area by what was estimated to be an Iraqi mechanized battalion. It crossed the border. It was engaged by a Marine light armored infantry battalion and tactical air. Result, 10 Iraqi tanks destroyed, 4 enemy prisoners of POW, and the Marines lost 2 light armored vehicles. At point number 2, right here, later on that same evening, another Iraqi battalion came across the border. These were again engaged by AC-130s and Cobras. We destroyed 4 tanks and 13 vehicles. We have had reports that the Iraqis went into, number 2 right here, that the Iraqis did go into Khafji. Of course, as you know, Khafji has been abandoned and deserted since the very first day of Desert Storm, so there was no one there. At position number 3, in the very early morning, Iraqi tanks and infantry again crossed the border. This time they were initially engaged by the Saudi Arabian National Guard, and then Marine TAC Air engaged them and the enemy withdrew. Early this morning, 40 more Iraqi tanks crossed the border again at the same place they came across before, right over here. They were once again engaged by the Marine light armored infantry. This time the results were 10 Iraqi tanks destroyed. They captured 9 enemy prisoners of war. At the present time, we have reports that the Saudis are moving forces into Khafji to eject any Iraqi that may be in that area. Now this, please, is a very preliminary report because, as you can imagine, fighting all night long and then fighting again today, we don't have final results. But as a very preliminary report, the total losses to date, the pilots are reporting rather sensational losses of 41 tanks destroyed, 12 vehicles destroyed, 3 frogs destroyed, 7 armored personnel carrier destroyed, 130 millimeter destroyed, 4 artillery positions destroyed, 6 bunker positions destroyed. We have confirmed figures of 24 Iraqi tanks destroyed and 13 other vehicles destroyed. The Marines lost 2 light armored vehicles. Unfortunately, I'm very sad that I have to report to you that they lost 12 KIA in that engagement and 2 WIA. These are the first casualties of any ground conflict, or first KIA of any ground conflict. Now I want to turn finally to Scuds, another subject that has been prominent in everyone's mind. As I told you before, I think Scuds are militarily insignificant. I saw one the other day, and after seeing one the other day, I got to tell you, it's even more militarily insignificant than I thought it really was. I went out and inspected one of the Scud bodies. As far as accuracy is concerned, it certainly is militarily insignificant, but it is a terror weapon. And it's a terror weapon that's been targeted against civilian population centers, and that makes it important. So let's talk about Scuds for a minute. As you know, the total Scud launches have been 53, 27 against Saudi Arabia and 26 against Israel. I think it's significant, however, that in the first week they launched 35, and the second week they launched 18. I like to feel that we're doing some good. We've flown almost 1,500 sorties against the Scuds to date, and the Patriot success, of course, is known to everyone. It's 100% so far of 33 engaged. There have been 33 destroyed. This chart also shows the sectors from which the Scuds are fired when they go after the major population centers. It's a very, very large area, but despite the size of the area, we have managed to destroy all of their fixed sites, 30 fixed sites, and we're quite confident of that. We've destroyed all of their major missile production facilities, and the pilots have reported to us more than 50 kills to date. But of course, again, we don't confirm that until we have hard information. I told you earlier that we have now declared air supremacy. By declaring air supremacy, that gives us the ability to use some tactics, some new tactics, that we're not able to use before. I'm going to have General Glosson come back up here and show you some film that I think will speak for itself.
First, by way of setting the stage, the first video you'll see is a air-to-air engagement with the F-15C and the MiG-25 Foxbat. What actually transpires is an attempt to attack a flight of F-16s exiting out of Iraq. The F-15C shoots down the trailer in the Foxbat. He launched his missile. The Foxbat was doing 700 knots. The pilot ejected before the missile reached the airplane, but the airplane was destroyed. When I pick up the tape, you will see the flight lead pulling to shoot down the other lead, or the other MiG-25. Note the radio terminology, if you will, and how he expresses and has total control of the situation to the extent of telling his wingman, make sure you're not in afterburner. Make sure you're only in meal power, because he's looking at a Foxbat that has a plume of fire coming out the tail, and so he just wants to make sure that's who it is, because there are friendlies very close by, other airplanes. The kill box, as we call it, is a rectangle box, and if you'll look in that kill box when it appears down in the right-hand corner, you will see the MiG-25 blow up. Roll the tape, please.
I know this says 19 January. There's countless footage of these things after 19 January. I got to tell you, every time I see them, I get airsick. I don't know what's going on. But these, I think it's obvious to anybody what's going on.
The bingo fuel call you heard, obviously, was he's getting low on fuel.
Bingo fuel. Bingo fuel. Anybody in burners? Everybody out of burners. 3, 6, 5, 1.
That's the MiG-25 right there.
Red, southeast box.
Heat-seeking missile he launched, and it missed. Now a radar missile. The heat-seeker missed. The second one was a radar. And next, I'll put you in the cockpit of an F-15E for an air-to-ground sortie. And through the help of a targeting pod and a nav pod on the F-15E, let you look into the night sky of Iraq as we are attacking mobile Scuds, and show you how, as General Schwarzkopf said, that we've changed our tactics a little bit from the standpoint of being able to do things that we could not do earlier because of the SAM threat. White indicates hot. And you'll see on the FLIR pod that the 3 erector launchers, or mobile Scuds, are turning into the storage area to join 4 others. And then when you notice black indicates cold, and you'll see these get darker as this film goes on. And now the pilot is maneuvering to drop laser-guided bombs on this target. There are a total of 11 vehicles in this area, and all of these are already loaded with Scud missiles. As you can see, these have already been fired. And now we will show you a slow motion so you can actually see the bombs impacting. Notice the bombs come through, impact. Watch this one roll. The next thing you'll see is a secondary explosion in this area. The AAA is firing from that area. The flight lead now clears his number 2 man in to drop an area denial munition to take care of the remainder of the 4 vehicles that were on this side of the road.
Thanks, Buster.
Yes, sir.
There's a little bit of argument going on in the community as to how much damage we did in this film. The minimum damage we did on the 11 vehicles has been confirmed. We have knocked out at least 3 mobile erector launchers, 4 Scud missiles on Scud servicing vehicles, and 3 more Scud servicing vehicles. The other possibility is that we knocked out as many as 7 mobile erector launchers in just that one strike. I would also like to report to you that using similar tactics last night in western Iraq, we also attacked and destroyed 3 Scud TELs with F-15s, and I feel we preempted a missile attack on Israel last night. Now, I certainly can't say there will be no more Scud launches. You can never say that. But I have a high degree of confidence that we're getting better and better at our ability to find them, and I think this tape speaks for itself in our ability to find them and destroy them, and I assure you we're going to continue to pursue those launchers. One last announcement. Today, we went over 500,000 troops in the theater. Let me just finish up by giving you a very brief closing assessment. By every measure, our campaign plan is very much on schedule. Now, there's no way that I'm suggesting that the Iraqi army is close to capitulation and going to give up. I think their actions last night have proven that to all of us. But I'm quite confident that the direction we're heading in is going to lead to exactly the outcome that we all want to see. That completes the formal briefing, and General Gloss and I now would be very happy to answer any questions you might have. Richard.
General Schwarzkopf, the Iraqis claimed yesterday that a POW of unknown nationality was killed in one of the bombing raids on a place where he's being used as a human shield. What can you tell us about this human shield business, and how are you dealing with that when it comes to bombing targets in Iraq?
Tell you I'd really like to tell you how I'd like to deal with it, but I won't get into that. All I can say is that is a gross violation of the Geneva Convention. I think it's very important to state right now that the International Red Cross has inspected all of our POW camps, and I will let their report speak for itself. I would tell you anecdotally that yesterday we transferred quite a large number of Iraqi POWs over to the Saudis, and the Iraqis were being treated so well in our POW camps that many of them said they'd be perfectly delighted to stay right there with the treatment they're getting. It's a funny thing about American troops, but they take pretty good care of their enemy once they're captured. But as I said, the International Red Cross has inspected our POW camps. I challenge the Iraqis right now to do the same damn thing in their POW camps, and look at how they're treating our people and the other coalition POWs. Thanks for the question. Skip?
General, you described heavy B-52 bombardment of troop positions in Kuwait. You described intercepting supply lines, troops that are giving you anecdotal evidence about 1 meal a day and body lice. And these same troops, it seems, made it 12 miles into Saudi territory last night. Was there any degree to which coalition troops might have been taken by surprise?
No, I don't think we were taken by surprise. As I said, there was nobody. Khafji had been abandoned. Okay, we had outposts in this area. The outposts reported exactly what we expected them to report. They made it into Ras al-Khafji, 12 miles, 6 miles. It's irrelevant how far it is because it was considered militarily. The reason why it was abandoned by the Saudis very early on is because, of course, it's in direct artillery range of the artillery right out here in Kuwait, and they didn't want to have bombardments going down on any troops that they had in this position. So in essence, the Iraqis that went into this area went unopposed. The Iraqis that went into these other areas were opposed and, in fact, returned back. I would tell you I don't think that battle is over by a long shot. I expect a lot more fighting will probably occur tonight. And I would tell you that, you know, obviously we've been talking, and we're ready for whatever comes in there tonight. But I don't think we were surprised. Yes, sir.
Sir, with the Marines engaged here, can you tell me how many American troops are in the forward positions there? I had the
No, I'm not. I would never tell you how many American troops are in the force.
I don't mean how many,
I know.
but is there quite a bit? Is there quite a bit of American troops in the front lines?
There's enough American troops where we need them to do the job. That's about all I'd like to say on that. Yes.
Could you share with us your views on the threat of Saddam Hussein to use chemical weapons against civilians, to escalate the war, to pull more surprises of that sort, to use biological weapons? Do you think those threats are credible or not? And what steps, if any, can you tell us that you're taking to meet them?
Well, as we've said all along, we don't discount anything on the part of Saddam Hussein. I think some of his other actions, some of the things he's done today have demonstrated that he's willing to do anything. So I frankly, having seen the accuracy of the Scud missile, once again, I don't think that the Scud missile from a military standpoint, or even its ability to lay down a very, very dense, wide, long type gas attack, you know, because it takes many missiles with a certain degree of sophistication to do that. I don't think that that's going to happen. On the other hand, there is no telling whatsoever what he might try and do with a single warhead on top of a single missile, and therefore I would never discount that possibility.
General, why do you think these 89 planes have flown into Iran? Can you give us a reason why you think that's happened?
Well, you could really come up with I come up with three different scenarios. Okay, scenario number one is they are flying off to husband them for another day. That's one of them. Okay, husband their resource for another day. Scenario number two, you have that they are flying in there to launch an attack, against us at some future date, although the Iranians claim that that is not the case. And to date, I see no reason why we shouldn't believe the Iranians. Scenario number three, and we've had some reports that some of those people were defectors. So it could be any one of those three things or a combination of all of them. But I think it's a very good sign that they don't feel confident where they are. They got to run someplace else to hide, and I'm delighted with that outcome.
General?
Yes, Joe.
General Glosson, in the film of the attack on the Scud launchers, you said something about an area denial weapon, and we saw quite a large piece of landscape light up there. What kind of weapon is that?
That was a CBU-87, referred to as a cluster bomb munition, and it's for the purpose that it was used for there. I think right back there.
General, could you tell us how many Iraqi troops and tanks have so far come across the border in these engagements down here?
No, I really can't. I told you about a battalion, I think, in each case, and there's about 40 tanks per battalion. And again, we're not in the business. Obviously, we're shooting, not counting when they come across. So
just one follow-up question.
Sure.
Given this entire presentation tonight about the effectiveness of the coalition air forces, is there a chance that there won't need to be a ground war?
There's always a chance of that. But certainly, you know, as a military planner, you always plan for the worst case rather than the best. And I'm certainly not going to assume away the capabilities of the enemy at all. And the mere fact that they launched this spoiling attack or whatever it might be indicates that, you know, they certainly have a lot of fight left in them. So I'm not discounting that right here. Yes.
So what were the weapons used against the hardened aircraft shelters? And a follow-up question on a different subject. Approximately what was the range of the MiG interception when the AIM-9 didn't work and he had to go to the radar-guided weapon?
He was, I'd rather not say the range when the AIM-9 did not fuse, for obvious reasons. The bomb that penetrated the hardened aircraft shelter was an I-2000 weapon that we used for that purpose, that's hardened for that situation.
Down here.
The bridges, the same type of weapon as we use against the hardened aircraft shelters.
General Schwarzkopf, there's been a late report from Reuters that the Iraqis have opened up another oil spigot in a place called Mina al-Bakr. Are you aware of this, and do you have any tentative plans to deal with it?
Mina al-Bakr has been leaking for several days now. That's an Iraqi oil terminal, in fact, and it's been attacked for several reasons in the past. To date, we've been watching that oil spill very carefully. Frankly, if it gets out of control, we'll try and do exactly what we did with the other one if we have to. I don't have any other reports other than that. I think I owe somebody over here.
General, I think to many civilian minds, the idea of the Iraqi ground forces going over to the offensive, as these probing attacks would appear to indicate, would seem very strange after such an intense aerial campaign. Could you enlighten those civilians?
Let me give you some. First of all, we haven't hit this area very hard. We haven't hit this area anywhere near as hard as we've hit the Republican Guards and some of the other areas. So this one hasn't been hit very hard. We may change our mind now, obviously. Secondly, there's an old saying, the best defense is a good offense, and sometimes, believe me, when people have been sitting in a hole being hit day after day after day by air, they decide that rather than sit around and take this anymore, why don't we get up and do something else about it? And it could be that. Thirdly, as I say, the Marines have been conducting very effective artillery raids in this area for about 3 nights in a row. It's entirely possible that these folks, based upon the severe damage that they had the night before, knew about all the artillery raids that have been about the same time. This may have been a preemptive attack to try and get after those forces that have been attacking them 3 nights beforehand.
Just a quick follow-up to that, if you don't mind. I seem to remember a week or possibly 2 weeks ago there being reports saying that these troops down there were virtually left without any soft-skinned vehicles to take them back. In fact, had virtually no means of transportation whatsoever.
Yeah, it wasn't these folks right here. It was these folks up here that came down, we think, okay? Yes, sir.
So you spoke of the explosion that was a 12 on a scale of 1 to 10.
Yes.
Can you give us any idea of what type of material that would have been, how long, to put it in layman's language, what sort of equipment for how many soldiers over what period of time? What sort of ammunition?
I wish I could. It's a huge ammunition dump. All of them in revetments. It's a buildup. When they first started building up in the theater, this was an area that they first started their major buildup from, and then they sent equipment down to other units, ammunition down to other units from that major supply depot. So all I can say is it was the major ammunition depot that supplied all of the forces in Kuwait, and with that level of damage done to it, coupled with the fact that most of the bridges are out now, and coupled with the fact that we're attacking the convoys that come down, that means that what they've got is what they've got. And they're going to, if they use that up, they're going to be hurting. Yes, sir, right here.
General, if you're unwilling to discuss Iraqi casualties amongst the Republican Guard, could you perhaps give us an estimate of the degree to which you reduced the effectiveness of them as a fighting force?
No, because all it would be is a rough estimate, and I don't like dealing in rough estimates when you start talking about enemy casualties. I told you, I'm anti-body count. Body count means nothing, absolutely nothing. And all it is a wild guess that tends to mislead people as to what's going on. And that's not the way we do business, by wild guessing. So I just don't think it's, I personally don't like the idea of issuing body counts on a comparative basis. I just think it puts undue pressure on commanders to come up with numbers that are unreal. Yes, sir, back in the back.
There are reports in the oil industry that 50 to 90% of all of Iraq's petroleum, refined petroleum, adjacent to refineries and to power plants has been destroyed. The storage facilities, basically. Is that in the order of magnitude, and to deny the logistical?
Yeah, I told you we went after militarily significant targets. We didn't want to destroy their oil industry, but we certainly wanted to make sure they didn't have a lot of gasoline for their military vehicles. Back over here.
There are an awful lot of reporters in Saudi Arabia, particularly up in the Iran region.
Yeah, you got about 2 battalions worth, okay? I'm going to keep that in mind if we ever need you.
Well, the majority are being barred by the military from access to covering the war. The ostensible reason is mainly a lack of equipment such as rucksacks and sleeping bags. Even if this is true, there's a large segment of non-full reporters who are interested in covering things like aviation, supply, logistics, maintenance, things that would not require us to use this equipment, do not require us to go out and live with the ground troops. My question is, when will the military decide to stop managing the public's impression in league with favored media and allow the American people to get a full...
Is this a question or a statement, okay?
Both.
I need to know.
Both. And allow the American people and the
answer to
international
your
community...
question is I will refer you to the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Public Affairs who makes those policies. I'm the theater commander, and my job is to follow those policies when they're made. Yes, sir.
General, I think the chart showed nearly 1,500 sorties against Scud sites. That's more than your number of sorties against any other type of target. Do you consider that a proportionate military effort on the Allied side for something which you say is militarily insignificant?
I'd prefer to think that it's a required military effort given the circumstances that we're in right now. Back over here.
General, is the Central Command in Baghdad still giving the orders to troops on the ground, or have you destroyed leadership command?
No, we haven't totally destroyed, but they certainly aren't giving the direct orders in the way they had to. There's a lot of circuitous routes that they have to go through. I would tell you even some corps commanders can't communicate directly with their division commanders and have to go through other division commanders to relay the signals. So they're being required to go around in circles rather than directly. Yes, sir.
General, can you tell us what, if anything, you're doing to encourage Iraqi troops to surrender? And
And following on from that, can you tell us if you have had any news at all of the missing CBS News crew?
Yes. First of all, we've got an active psychological warfare program going. What we're basically telling them is that if they stay where they are and fight, they're probably going to be maimed or get killed. And if they come over here, they're going to be treated very, very well, and they'll live and get to go home. And that's basically the message we're sending them. The second question was...
You know what the CBS guy?
No, we found their vehicle, okay, and then we got the very best trackers we had, and we had those trackers follow their tracks, and their tracks went into Kuwait, and of course that's as far as we could go. We're very concerned about it. I've alerted all my commanders. We're all constantly on the lookout for them, but that's about the best information I can give you at this time.
One follow-up. How are you getting the message to the Iraqi troops that they stay and they die, or they can surrender and be treated well?
I'd rather not answer that question. Thank you.
General, 3 days ago you gave us a briefing on the military effort to take out those manifolds at the Amadi oil fields. You talked about the airstrikes that went in. A Washington newspaper ran a story saying that the Navy SEALs were ready and willing to go in and do that job, but that you told them no. Is that true?
Normally in response to a question like that, I would say that report contains some inaccuracies. However, reverting to my old style, I would describe that report as bovine scatology. Okay, better referred to by the troops as BS. I don't know who that guy's source is, but he ought to get a new source because his source is a liar. Yes, sir.
I want to see if I got this right. I get the impression that the Iraqi troops have seized Khafji. It's a little border town there, I know. We've all been up there. And that not American troops per se, but the Saudi National Guard troops, which I don't remember if they have that much armor, are trying to retake that city. Is that accurate?
I think I'd really rather leave a question like that to the Saudis because they can give you a lot more details on that. We work very closely together. The Saudis have reported to me that they're mounting an operation to go back into Khafji. I wouldn't really say the Iraqis have seized Khafji. You know, when you walk into an uninhabited place, it's really not much of a seizure.
They're occupying it?
Huh?
They're occupying Khafji?
The last I heard, there were some there, okay? But again, I have no confirmed evidence that they're still there. And let's wait and see what happens. We'll let the Saudis brief you on that because I think they can give you better information. Yeah.
General, without revealing any military secrets, can you tell me what will be the factors or the criteria for you to decide if to begin a ground attack and when to begin a ground attack?
First of all, I do not make that decision. The President of the United States, in consultation with the Secretary of Defense, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, will make that decision. The second answer is no. Okay. Yeah.
What is your reaction to the communique out of Washington the other day with Moscow and Washington talking about a possibility of a ceasefire if Iraq shows any indication whatsoever of pulling out of Kuwait? Do you think it's feasible from your perspective to
well,
conduct
I think that the correct answer to that from my part would be everything I know, we have no intentions whatsoever of terminating this military campaign until we've accomplished the objectives that were announced at the outset. I'd refer any other comment to the White House on that. Yeah, over here.
General, you talked about the Kuwaiti theatre of operations. If you go into Kuwait, expel the Iraqis, are you going to stop at the border or are you going to pursue them into Iraq?
Let's wait and see. Okay, this campaign has many different phases to it. There's certain determinations that happen to each one, and I'm not going to telegraph any of our punches, but I will repeat once again what the President of the United States has said all along. That's our argument is not with the Iraqi people. Our intention is not to conquer Iraq in any way or reduce Iraq to a non-country. Never has been.
So can I follow up? The UN resolution says to expel Iraq from Kuwait. You're just leaving the option open that you may pursue them into Iraq. Is that correct?
I'm not leaving any options open. I'm not leaving any options closed. I'm just saying that we have a military campaign that we're going to execute, and I'm not going to go into any of the planning options beyond that. Back in the back. Yes, sir.
Sir, you spoke of interdicting the main supply routes. Is it possible that the enemy could shift to secondary supply routes effectively, pickup trucks, jeeps, mule trains, etc.?
Yeah, there's always that possibility, but that's pretty rough to do. They have a very limited road net, and of course, with the Tigris and Euphrates being where it is, you got to go across the Tigris and Euphrates. I would expect to see pontoon bridges being put up. Pontoon bridges are pretty easy to find, and they're even easier to take out. But I would expect...
Follow-up, sir. Certainly in the Indochina War, the enemy did do exactly that, and their supplies continued to roll south. Granted, there's no triple canopy forest
Right.
here, and we have better night sighting capability. But do you anticipate the possibility of an extended supply effort down to the more primitive level?
I would imagine that they will try. And I can assure you that we will also continue to do what we've been doing. Big difference between here and Vietnam as far as air operations and the ability to interdict supply lines. Yes, sir.
General, you mentioned the Marine casualties of 12 dead and 2 wounded. In your estimation, is that unusually high for an encounter of that size?
No, particularly when you consider, the number of tanks that were involved, the number of tanks that were knocked out, and that sort of thing. 12 is not unusually high. Listen, any is unusually high as far as, any is intolerably high as far as I'm concerned, but unfortunately, that's going to happen. Yes?
Is there any news on the Arab forces who are stationed in Khafji as well, what casualties they've taken?
I bet there were no Arab forces in Khafji.
There is a forward headquarters unit for Kuwaitis in that region.
Not in Al-Khafji. There was nobody in Al-Khafji, nobody, well, I won't say there was nobody there, but there was no Arab unit there that I know of. But why don't you ask the Saudis and the Arabs that. I think they can probably give you a much better answer than I can. All the way in the back?
Given that you're disrupting the supply routes to Kuwait, and there are about 100,000 Kuwaitis still in Kuwait, and probably several 100,000 Palestinians and other nationals, what advice would you give them? Would you give to them now? What should they do?
To give to the Palestinian nationals who are in Kuwait?
All the people currently in Kuwait City, all the civilian population of Kuwait City.
I hope that they are continuing to resist in every way they possibly can. I would hope that their spirits are somewhat uplifted like this. I hope that they would continue to protect themselves as much as they can. I don't want them to do anything foolish that might get them hurt. I don't think there's any need for that at the present time. Believe me, if there is a need for that, we'll probably let them know ahead of time. Yes, sir.
You have mentioned that you have destroyed all of Iraqi nuclear reactor facilities. Do you have any information about the contamination?
About the what?
Contamination.
Yeah. Every target that we have attacked, be it nuclear, chemical, or biological, we have very carefully selected the destruction means, okay, after a lot of advice from a lot of very, very prominent scientists, that we've selected this destruction means in such a way that we absolutely, almost to a 99.9% assurance, have no contamination. I found one thing, none of the scientists will ever give you 100% assurance of anything, but they will tell you that there are certain ways that you can limit that contamination, and every one of those targets that we've attacked, we were very, very careful in the method of attack and the munitions we used to ensure that we didn't have any contamination. Yes, sir.
General, I'm curious about your handling of civilian targets, especially the point you made about power stations, I think, and hydro stations.
Yeah.
You mentioned you've left them alone because you don't want to reduce Iraq to, I think you described it as a non-country, or to rubble. But can I ask you, in the bottom line, if it comes to the big push, is that open? Will those be hit?
That's a decision that lies with the hands of the President of the United States.
So it isn't ruled out?
I have no knowledge whether it's in or out. As I say, that's a decision rests solely with the President of the United States.
General, I wonder if you could speak generally from your experience.
Generals always speak generally.
What B-52 strikes of the type you've described can do to troops on the ground, even troops who are well dug in?
I don't want to get into too much detail, but I would tell you that the B-52 has a much higher degree of accuracy than it's given credit for. And therefore, regardless, and we have different types of munitions that we use also, and the combination of the accuracy of the munitions will have an effect on any kind of target, and we vary the targets, we vary the munitions based upon the type of target. I'd just like to leave it at that. Yes, sir, over here.
In 1986, during the Iran-Iraq War, it was generally believed that Saddam Hussein was personally ordering basically every major maneuver against Iran. I wonder if you understand that he is doing the same type of thing today, and given the effect that you've had on his command and control, if that's a factor.
I obviously can't say whether he's giving every single order or not. I would certainly say that his ability to give timely orders has been greatly reduced. In other words, if I'm on the battlefield and the situation changes and I'm waiting around for an order from the higher, I'm going to wait a lot longer now than I would have had to wait before. Yeah, back here.
General, when the Iraqis occupied Khafji today, is there any preliminary indication that they destroyed the Arabian Oil Company facilities there, 15 million barrels storage? And,
I haven't heard any reports of
refinery?
that nature. Yeah.
Besides the fight to retake Khafji, whatever we're calling an occupation seizure, is the conflict continuing at the other entry locations you pointed out?
No. When I came over here, at least, all of those places were quiet. But as I say, I would not be the least bit surprised if we didn't have further action. Yeah, back here.
General, why did Iraqi troops and Iraqi tanks attack Khafji? Do you have any idea about what they wanted to do?
Oh, I think that there were, as I just mentioned earlier, it may have been to preempt another artillery raid. It may have been for all sorts of reasons. I've already heard that it's being touted as a major military victory on the battlefield. You know, moving into an unoccupied village 6 miles inside the friendly lines when there's nobody there, I don't consider that a major military victory. However, if they want to consider it one, that's fine. That's just one battle. It's not the war. Yeah.
Assessment of the fighting capability of the Republican Guard now?
I think it's too early to make an assessment on that. How about 2 more questions? Yeah, right.
One for General Glosson, if you don't mind. Refugees coming into Jordan have been telling tales of convoys of civilian vehicles being strafed, people running in the desert and being strafed, bombs dropping everywhere. Given that frightened people exaggerate, nonetheless something must be happening. Can you tell us what you're hitting along that road and what happens if there are a lot of civilian vehicles in amongst what look like a military target?
We're striking only military targets. Now, having said that, the Iraqi government insists on storing scuds in culverts and other things along the highway. And as you saw on the tape, when we see those type of vehicles go into those facilities, we bomb them. We make every attempt to minimize any possibility of civilian casualty. And that's the best answer I can give you.
Yeah.
General, along those same lines, some of the refugees and Red Cross workers have brought back fragments of bombs identified as cluster bombs, CBU. Are you using cluster bombs along that highway? And if so, how do you reconcile that with your efforts to minimize civilian casualties along this particular refugee route?
Well, you saw along one of the highways that we just showed you the film, and that was cluster bombs on those 4 vehicles or Scud missile launchers that were sitting along that highway. Yes, we used the cluster munition to cover a wider area when the military situation dictates that.
Let me step in here. We have never said there won't be any civilian casualties. What we have said is the difference between us and the Iraqis is we are not deliberately targeting civilians. And that's the difference. There are going to be casualties. Unfortunately, that's what happens when you have a war. But we are certainly not deliberately targeting civilians. We never have, and we have no intention to do it in the future. And our enemy certainly is, and I hope that's obvious to everybody in this room since you've been under Scud attack. Yes, sir, right over here.
I wanted to take you back to the planes in Iran. How would you rate the probability that they might have gone there for the purpose of launching an attack? And for example, what kind of supplies, ammunitions, that sort of thing that they might have there? And are you in a good, solid position to deal with such a probability?
I can't rate a probability, okay? But because I cannot rate a probability, yes, we are in a good, solid position to deal with such a probability. One more, right here, right here.
If Saddam Hussein were to have a briefing tonight in Baghdad and discuss 2 weeks of war, he would probably say that that is the coalition forces, have thrown the best at him that they could, and still he is able to launch an offensive. Now, as much as a distortion that may be, how much in your own thinking, when you're going through his mental process, is the political dimension of this war a factor? The fact that it is going on, that the Arab peoples are looking at it, and that you have a political constraint as well as other constraints to end the war.
Yeah. This is strictly Norm Schwarzkopf's opinion now, right? But it's an opinion based upon discussions with a lot of friends throughout the Gulf area, some of whom happen to be very pro-Saddam Hussein. To date, Saddam Hussein has lied to them. They told them that Tel Aviv was a crematorium. We all know that's not true. To date, he has told them that he has shot down 170 American and coalition aircraft. Everybody knows that's not true. He has announced that he's going to do all sorts of other wonderful things. The other day he said a prayer for the dead, okay, about saying because Riyadh was going to be wiped out that night. That did not happen. Okay, he has lied consistently about us damaging religious places. A lot of people know that that is not true. So I think that one of the things that's happened out there is a lot of people who were supporters of Saddam Hussein, at least those who I'm not talking about the mob in the street, because the mob in the street isn't going to change their opinion. But I'm talking about people who intellectually, or at least reasonably, thought that he was supporting a cause, have found that he's not delivering on his promises, and that's probably doing him some harm. And I think that eventually they're going to find the same thing out about this particular attack. Okay, with regard to Saddam Hussein saying that he has met the best that the coalition has to offer, I would only say the best is yet to come. Thank you very much.
That concludes this briefing.